It's okay. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of Inlay Terms. I'm your host, Payman Ascari, and with me today, I have a fellow PPC candidate, Miss Isabel Pereira. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
I'm doing great, Isabel. Why don't we, to get things started, tell us a little about yourself, where you were born, where you grew up, where you are now.
Okay. Well, I was born in Portugal, and it's not the mainland Portugal, the islands of Portugal, the Azores. So I was born in 1963. My dad had wanted to immigrate to Canada since before he got married, but it took quite a while for the process for his application to be approved. So he did immigrate to Canada in 1966. So I was two and about 2.5 when he came to Canada. He came in April, and then he sponsored my mother and my sisters and I in November of the following year. So in November of 1967. So we came and joined my father in Toronto. So I was raised from 4 until like adulthood in the city of Toronto in the West End. Um, I did live in different areas of Toronto and eventually moved out to Ajax, where we had a family, and so I raised my children in Ajax. At the time actually before my children were born, I bought a property here up in Armour Township. Our plan was to raise our children here in a small community. Unfortunately, we weren't able to find full-time jobs. Like not I was able to secure like something casual, but we couldn't leave. We couldn't, it was too risky. So we ended up raising our children in the GTA area. And once I retired in 2018, we moved up to Armour Township full time. Um, my our plan as a family was that once I retired, we were going to spend half the year in Europe. I did buy a home in the Azores in, I guess, what was when I turned 50. So whatever that was, you know, uh, several years before I retired. And yeah, I guess it was 5 years before I retired because I took early retirement at 55. And because of the scamdemic, pandemic, whatever you want to call it, I was not able to travel. So as a result of that, I became more involved in the community. I volunteer with the Legion, and I started to attend the Armour Township Council meetings every other Tuesday, like twice a month. And I also started a community group, Neighbors Helping Neighbors, because I was, like many people, feeling quite distraught about the future, and it was really difficult to, um, believe that no one else had a problem with what was going on, like, the fringe minority, like, I'm the only one. So I started to talk to my neighbors and others, and I found out that no, actually, there's a lot of us. It's not a fringe minority. And I should back up a little bit. I've always been an NDPer, just because when I started work, it was a union shop, and I became a union steward, union VP. Later on, when I went into management, I respected the collective agreement. I didn't necessarily agree with everything, but I respected the process. So if there's something that needed to be changed, you bring that up during collective bargaining, and you make adjustments. And I like to be perfectly honest, I never really took a deep dive into the NDP platform. I just took it at face value that the NDP was for the people, that unions supported their members. Like I just believed all of that. Um, Even though I was retired by the time the COVID pandemic took place, I was really surprised that the unions did not stand up for their members. I was really upset listening to Andrea Horvath, the leader of the NDP. pressured Doug Ford around disclosing the vaccination status of his MPPs. I also have a privacy background, so that's like a violation of your personal health information. So it was like, what is going on? So at that point, I did do a deep dive into like what does the NDP actually stand for, and I reviewed the platforms of all the parties, all the political parties at that time, and I was also curious as to why there's this like hate on for Max. Like, what is it about this man that the media is really showing him or portraying him to be this like racist, evil person? And when I looked into the People's Party of Canada and into Maxine, I realized that he was speaking the truth and that the People's Party of Canada's platform aligns with my values. So I bought a membership and I said, you know what? This man is out there. He was the only one that stood with the truckers. He was the only one that, defied um, these tyrannical mandates. Like he, was out gathering with people in a safe way, but still being persecuted and arrested and things like that. So I, bought a membership. I contributed. About a year and a half ago, the AGM, not the AGM, sorry, the EDA asked for members to come together and do a brainstorming activity to see if we could um, expand the EDA, and there were some roles that needed to be filled. So I RSVP'd and said that I would come and help and help out whichever way I could. Not really having any idea that the position that I was going to be stepping into was candidate, but that's what happened. Because
Fascinating story.
we need representation, right? And so we need to have the PPC on the ballot here in Parry, Muskoka. And I feel strongly that this is something that we have to do. My parents, and I guess I should back up a little bit, at the time when we left Portugal, it was under a dictatorship. So my dad was born in 1933. My mom was born in 1937. Portugal entered into a dictatorship in 1932. And that dictatorship lasted until 1974. So my dad left in 66, and my mom and myself and my sisters left in 67. So basically, my parents' whole life was under this dictatorship. And when the mandates started to come out, even though my parents had been in Canada for a very long time, um, it was like they had just left that dictatorship. Like my father said to me that this cannot happen. Um, this was before I became candidate, but he said the government is doing this to hurt the people, which it kind of really blew me away because my father watched a lot of television, so I thought that he was totally like brainwashed by all the propaganda. But he was able to see through all of that, and I'm just speculating that he was able to do that because of what he went through growing up under a dictatorship. And my parents went through a lot of sacrifices, as do many immigrant families when they come to a country. They make the very hard decision of leaving what they know for a better life for their children. And I can't like just sit back and let our country go down the tubes the way it is. So I have grandchildren, and I'm doing what I can to make sure that we hold on to the liberties that we have left and regain what we've already lost.
No,
So
very well
I
put.
do. One of the things that actually inspires me is the Canadian Bill of Rights, and I make a habit of speaking about it when I can, because I think it is a very powerful document. A lot of people think that the Bill of Rights is no longer valid, but it is valid because it is a supreme law of the land and nothing can supersede it. And I'm trying to hold it up, but it's like, hey, I don't know if I can see it very
Maybe
well
center
now.
it. Center it. It's getting blurred, but
Oh, it's
yeah,
blurred. Okay, well,
unfortunately, there we go. We saw
the
it briefly.
I mean, the point is that this document was written in 1960 by the Right Honorable John D. Baker. And there's a quote there that I think we should all learn and live by. And I'm going to see, because it's so blurred even on my copy here. I did write it out at one point, which basically says, I am Canadian, I am a free Canadian. Yeah, sorry about that. I thought I had it handy. I have a lot of documentation here. Okay, well, I can't put my finger on it right now, but basically he said that he would fight to defend our freedoms, not just for himself, but for every Canadian. And so I think that that's a very important document, and we should remember that document, the Bill of Rights, is still a valid document, and it's, to me, in my opinion, it's stronger than the Charter.
I'd agree with you. I love the fact that it mentions property rights. That's what really
Yes,
gets me.
yes, and the family.
I didn't know that. I guess I haven't actually read the whole thing.
Let me see if I can. I dropped it. Is there a way that you can pause this, or are we like live and I can't do
Oh
that?
no, we're live.
I can't do that. Okay.
What did
All
you want
right.
to do?
Sorry?
Did you want me to share my screen or?
I wanted to pick it up because I dropped it. And I
Oh,
wanted
okay.
to just, but yeah, I'm sure maybe if you have like notes or comments or whatever, maybe we can put the Bill of Rights as a link, and people could
Oh
look
yeah,
at
I
it.
can put a link in the show notes.
Yeah.
Isabel, I have a question for you. Your
Okay.
father, you answered half, well, part of my question. Why did he leave Portugal? Why did he want to come to Canada? What was it about Canada? Do you know?
Well, he did have three sisters that were in Canada, and at the time, in order for you to come into Canada, you needed to be sponsored. And I think that might have been true for other countries as well. So it was very difficult to emigrate somewhere if you didn't have somebody that could actually sponsor you. So my aunts were in a position to sponsor my father, and that's why he chose Canada. I mean, obviously his sisters came here because it was free. Like, you had freedom, not that it was free to come. You had freedom. It was actually quite an exercise that you had to go through, because you had to have a certain level of education. You had to have skills that like work skills that Canada was looking for. So when my dad came, he actually was working in the farm. So as a I guess a farm hand, and then in construction. His sisters' husbands were working in the railway, so they were like all in Northern Ontario.
Do you know how his sisters got here? I'm really fascinated by this.
Okay, so I know one of his sisters, her, I guess, fiance had immigrated to Canada with his parents. Um, and so that story I don't know, but then he went back and married my aunt, and they came to Canada, and then she sponsored another one of her sisters, and so that's kind of how it worked. So over a decade, one sponsored the other and sponsored the other, and then they sponsored my dad.
And when you say sponsored, I'm guessing they had to financially support them
Yes,
as well.
yes, yes. So they had to show that they could um, support him financially, house him. And then when my dad came, he worked for a year and a half to be able to show that he could support my mother and his children, and
Right.
myself and my sisters. So it wasn't just we just opened borders like we have now. And actually my dad we all had to pass physicals. Like, you couldn't just come in, you had to be healthy. You had to, like I said, be able to read and write. So you had to have a certain education, and you had to be um, willing and able to work.
Yeah, when I came in '89. I don't remember if we had to do a physical, but I do remember there was a point system. You had to support yourself, and my father had to come here first to figure out and prove that we had a place to stay.
Yeah. So it was similar. So yeah, I guess I don't know when the changes happened, but after once my parents were established and they bought a house, then they started to sponsor my mother's side of the family. So on my mother's side of the family, she was the first one that came to Canada. And then slowly we were able to sponsor, another aunt and then another aunt and then one of those aunts and was able to sponsor another person, you know what I mean? So it kind of was a slow process and it was just like one at a time, but it was done in a way that no one, became a burden on society. Like, you know, they were supported by the family that was here, and then they had to show that they could take care of their immediate family before they sponsored it in. So when we sponsored my mother's brother, he came by himself and he went through the same process that we went through. He had to show that he could support his wife and his children before they were sponsored, before they were allowed to come in a few years later, or maybe not a few years, like a year and a half later, something similar to my experience.
Another question I had, I'm always fascinated when people disenfranchised NDP voters. Like, I'm fascinated to know what drove them towards the party and what drove them away from the party. So, what was it about, like, the NDP brand, the NDP promise, that really you found enticing?
Well, it was my understanding was that it was for the working people. And if you look back to when unions were first created, like the reason that we needed unions was because employees were working very often under terrible conditions. And so the unions were a way of people being united. And so united, we're strong. Divided, we're not. And through the union, platform type of thing, um, we were all told that, the NDP is our party. The NDP is the party for the people. And like I said, I never questioned it. I never really, I think like most people, you just believe things, like take things at face value, and we would support. The unions would always support the NDP. And I did have a couple of, you know, think times during my life when I did kind of question it. Like the Ray days was one of them. I thought, well, that's kind of odd, but oh well. And then there was another time during a collective bargaining when our agent, like the union agent, basically, made a deal with the management lawyer without, you know, the bargaining team being involved in that discussion, right? So it was like there was kind of like some things that I thought, okay, well, that's probably this union, you know what I mean? I'm sure it's like, this is not okay, but it's probably just this one individual. And then it was the whole COVID experience that made me realize that no, this it would probably like the NDP were probably never for the people. You know what I mean? It was just my understanding and I guess the common understanding. So people really need to take a deep dive and look at what the party truly stands for. Another thing that I guess I should mention is that my son, who's 37 now, um, he had been telling me since he was a teenager that things aren't as they appear, and he told me basically about everything that I know now. But it was really difficult to realize that that could be true, like, especially like I worked in healthcare and, he would say that things like the vaccines are poison, that the healthcare system is really a sick care system. Like it's not really designed or intended to make you well. And I now realize that he was right. Like, unfortunately, he
Oh,
was right.
I'm sorry. What was that? Would you like to repeat that for your son? Mom was
Oh,
wrong.
my
Son
son,
was
yes,
right.
yes, yes, my son, he was
Oh.
right, he was right, and I tell him, many times that, I give him credit for, like, it was the scamdemic that woke me up, but I think I woke up because of everything that he had told me before that I just realized, he's right. If he hadn't been telling me all of the things for many years, I might not have it might not have clicked for me.
So before I want to stick with the NDP. What is there anything that the NDP party is still doing that you agree with, or is it just completely a lost cause? Like, is there any? Are they supporting maybe workers in some ways?
No, not that I can see, no. You know, they say the things that sound right, like the diversity and all that kind of stuff, but it's all woke and it's yeah, it's total yeah. It's, like, to me, it's almost communism, like, the way it is, it's like they're yeah, like the communists have infiltrated the NDP, and, like, it probably was that way, you know, since since the time that I became an NDP in the beginning, you know? Yeah.
All right. Well, what about you mentioned that the events surrounding COVID and the lockdowns, they kind of drove you away from the party. Was it was it something specific to the NDP, or was it just that the NDP and the Liberals and the Conservatives, they kind of did the same thing?
Well, to be honest, I kept thinking, "Okay, well, this is crazy, you know, for sure the unions are gonna stand up to this. Well, this is crazy when the unions didn't stand up for their members. For sure the NDP are gonna be the voice of reason, and they're gonna stand up for the people." And when that did not happen, that's kind of when that was like that was the wake-up call. Um, you know, they had many opportunities, and instead of standing for the people and the rights of the working person, they actually were working against us.
I'm really beating a dead horse here, but on the last question, the unions, you said that the unions sort of, they let you down. Those are my words.
Yes.
Was it that they let the employers down, or was it something beyond that that you were expecting from them?
Well, when the
Sorry, not
members
the employers, the
the
employees.
employees, yes, yes, they let the employees down because their role is to support their members. So members pay union dues, and they're supposed to have a safe work environment, and the union is tasked with that. They have a duty to represent, and they were failing to represent.
So it's basically like if you hired a security guard and they just stood by while somebody was mugging you. They didn't do their
Yeah,
job.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay. I guess let's move on to the People's Party. You said that you did a deep dive into the parties and you kind of you liked what you saw with the People's Party, the PPC. What about it attracted you to it?
Well, the first thing was small government, so less bureaucracy. They say that they are a party for the people, and you can see the actions of the leader that that is true. So it's not just what's written, you know, on paper. It's you know, actions speak louder than words. So when he talked about individual rights, when he talks about self-defense, when he talks about firearms, when he talks about foreign affairs, every single policy that I read, it was like, yes, this is exactly it aligns with my beliefs. So he's the People's Party of Canada is the only party that actually identifies the UN as a dysfunctional organization, and that their goal is to um, get rid of or weaken national sovereignty. So um, that's the only party that sees that, and so that was one of the things that I was looking for is what is the PPC's stance on these globalist companies, these globalist organizations, these NGOs, and their influence on our own national sovereignty. The other parties are not even speaking about that, and the PPC is the only party that said that they would withdraw from any agreements that were made with the UN and the UN agencies that would somehow infringe on our sovereignty. So that's a big one for me.
With respect to limited government, when I talk to people that are former NDP Green Liberal voters, and they tell me, quote unquote, they would never vote for the Conservative Party of Canada. And I ask them why that is. They say it's because the conservatives, they get in and they slash spending, they start implementing cutbacks. How do you square that circle where we want limited government, but some of our voter base doesn't like cutbacks? Like, do you have an answer for that?
Yeah, because I think that there's a lot of mismanagement of funds, and the big, when you keep adding layers and putting in programs that use limited resources, like use our funds, and those funds could be used somewhere else. So I don't necessarily think that the PPC would have to cut programs. They're just going to be redirecting and using the money more efficiently and getting rid of one of the things that one of the more recent policies is the diversity, inclusion, and equity. So there's a lot of bureaucracy and a lot of money being wasted on programs like that actually do not benefit Canadians. So I think that that's where we would make a difference is eliminating those make work type of sound good initiatives that actually do not achieve anything and just waste money.
Let's use that as a segue to get into policy. What's your position on gender ideology in schools? We'll start with a very topical one.
Okay, so it's really mind boggling because I am having a hard time believing that some of this stuff is actually true. I believe that, especially in the elementary grades, that there's no business of speaking about gender ideology. The children go to school to learn how to read, how to write, arithmetic, science, those types of things. They are not going to school to learn about, gender. Um, so I think it's extremely inappropriate. Um, it's very confusing. I was just at an event yesterday or a social gathering, and we were talking about this subject, and I thought, when I was 12, I was really conscious about, my breasts. I didn't want anybody to see that, so I would wear baggy tops. I also my favorite color is blue. I'm the eldest, so if someone was picking on my one of my sisters, I would, go and stand up for my sister. So it would have been very easy, when I was 12 years old for someone to come up to me and say, Isabel, I think you might be a boy. You know what I mean? And I totally would have thought, "Oh, yeah, probably am a boy, like, where do I get this, like, binding thing," because it's like you know what I mean? So, I think it's extremely dangerous, and it has no business. I think we have to let children be children, and, these pronoun things and putting things into their head, it's a very confusing time. I mean, young children aren't even thinking about that. They just wanna play with the friends that they like, and they wanna play whatever games they wanna play, whether it's, a boy game or a girl game, and, when I was growing up, we were told not to label people, not to pigeonhole people, and that's exactly what's happening now. People are being labeled and pigeonholed, but, they're also told, "Well, it's fluid, so, like, tomorrow you can do something else and be somebody else and whatever," right? So, I have a real issue with that, and I don't know how much is, like, actually happening, but the little bits that I've heard is very disturbing, and, I am concerned, especially for the younger children.
Do you think this is the new normal going forward, or did they cross sort of a red line with parents, and we're going to see a pushback or a reckoning?
Yes, I believe that they have crossed the line. I think there's still a lot of people who, are afraid of being like offensive and want to be politically correct. And, there are some that I guess, still think it's like cool or whatever, but the majority of parents are very much against this. And, I do think that we are going to see pushback.
All right. Uh, Here's another. We're starting with all the hard ones. The next one, foreign policy. Like, what's your view on the conflict in Ukraine, and what's your view on what's going on in the Middle East?
Okay, so I'm against all war. I believe that an individual has the right to defend themselves, but it has to be proportionate. And I don't know. I do not supporting those wars. So if we support those wars, then we are at war. And yeah, so I am against in being involved in all. And I know some people say, well, it's better for them to fight over there than fight over here. Um, I War is not the answer. So there has to be other channels like diplomacy and finding out what the root cause is, and instead of this retaliatory back and forth. No one wins in a war. It's kind of like when you go on strike. And I don't want to, but it's the same thing. When you go on strike because you want better. A lot of the times, it's more money. But while you're off on strike, you're losing money. So it's really a catch-22. And I think morally, killing is wrong. And even if you were to be able to target that one individual, I still believe that killing that individual is wrong. So that's my position on war.
What about this one? This is kind of a silly question. You mentioned self-defense. Why do you need self-defense? Why do you think it's an important principle?
Because there's always something that will happen, whether it's someone who is truly evil, or just opportunistic. There are things that happened in my life personally that, if I had, yeah, okay, maybe I'm not going to talk about that.
Well, that's fine. That's fine. Yeah,
It's a
we can
little bit
skip over that.
emotional, but the thing that kind of drove it home for me was that case in, I believe it was in Peterborough, where a person went in with a bat, and the shopkeeper, the clerk, after being hit, took the bat off of them and used the bat against the assailant, and then they were charged. So that's wrong, right? If there's no consequences, then people will feel that they have the right to come and take something from you, because it's even the way society has been, like, I guess the mainstream media makes it sound like, well, if you're from a disadvantaged position and somebody has something that you don't have, that's not fair. You know what I mean? So it gives people sometimes the license to go and take something. And I think that we have the right to not let them take it. The other recent case was the car thefts, where the police said, that you should
Yeah.
leave your keys by your door and just let them take your car, right? Well, no, like I'm not going to let somebody steal something from me. So if I need to, get physical, not me necessarily, because I don't have the height and strength, but you know what I mean? I think it is appropriate. If you need to physically stop somebody, you should be able to do that without being charged, which is what's happening now. Somebody breaks into your house, they injure themselves, they sue you, and you're charged. And that makes absolutely no sense at all. So self-defense, we have the right to defend ourselves, we have the right to defend our property. And if up and including using violence if we have to.
What where did we go wrong in society that we ended up with a police department that recommended putting your car keys by the door, and they thought that was perfectly acceptable?
I really I really don't understand that, because even when people have like a tracking mechanism on their car, so they say, okay, well, they took my car, I know where it is, it's over here. The police are still not, you know, doing their job and going to get your car. So, I really don't understand what the role of the police is right now, because, like, you see them out there making, raising money by giving you a ticket if you're going a little bit fast. But when you need protection or you need their help, it seems like they don't have the resources to do that.
No. No, I agree with you on that one. Which I guess the next question that's related to that would be guns, weapons. What's your view on gun rights or lack thereof, whichever it is?
Yeah, so we have the right to have arms. So I have my PAL, my so I have guns. And I have them to be able to like, so I have a hobby farm. I have animals, and we've had to, you know, use our gun to scare away bears recently, um, coyotes, raccoons, foxes. Um, you know, they're registered. So everything is, we've taken our firearm safety course. Everything is above board. The restrictions that the federal government wanted to put in were basically going to make it more onerous for legal, law abiding citizens that actually went through the proper process, have their PAL, registered their gun, um, but it's not doing anything for the illegal guns that are in the street, which is like it's not like a person who, has taken the course, has their license, purchased a gun. We're not the ones going out there committing crimes, right? The crimes that are being committed are by individuals who accessed their weapons illegally off the black market or wherever they get them from. I don't know. But yet the legislation is really targeting um, the wrong group of people. So it's not going to get those illegal guns off the street. And, like I'm at the point now where it's like, is that being done on purpose as well? Like, I don't know. I don't know. So they want to take the guns away from law abiding citizens for whatever reason, but the criminals are still going to have access to the guns that they have because they're not addressing that issue of where's the source of their firearms coming from. It's not coming from, the stores that we buy them from. I don't know where they're buying them from.
I'm going to ask you a question about all this gun legislation. Do you think that it's uh, the powers that be, maybe it's the party whip, they're going to these naive liberal NDP Green Party candidates and they're saying slogans like more guns equals more crime or guns kill people, something like that. And they just go, oh, wow, that makes sense. Or do you think it's that the candidates for these parties are saying, we don't want the citizen to have that power. We want us, the law enforcement, to have that power. Do you think they're smart or do you think they're stupid?
Well, I think it's the first. I think it's like people are not really thinking for themselves and looking at, if you have a society that's able to defend themselves, that's a safer society, right? Than a society that's vulnerable. And yeah, like you can see that the police, when you do call them, they're not actually coming to help you. And if you do somehow, you know, defend yourself, you're the one that's being charged. So I really don't understand why there would be a candidate that would be against firearms. Like I'm against illegal firearms. I'm against people using firearms to, in a violent way to, you know, commit crimes. But I am not against an individual owning a firearm.
What about the fact that it's a slippery slope? Like you can't take a pocket knife with you now if you intend to use that as self defense. If we go down this road, they're gonna outlaw wooden spatulas. You can't use
Yeah,
it to whack somebody.
yeah. Well, knitting needles, okay? If you take a knitting needle or a crochet hook, that's a weapon. A pencil is a weapon, right? So now you can't have a pencil in your pocket because you might use that to like poke somebody in the eye. Like I don't know. They can say anything is a weapon, right? Yeah, and so basically, I think we have to, stand up now because you mentioned slippery slope, and it definitely is a slippery slope. Like they're gonna say, well, like you can't have this or you can't have that or this is okay, but that's not okay. And then tomorrow it's this other thing that's not okay. And even with our pal, You have to renew it every so many years. And if you forget to renew it, you're a criminal now, because now you have these, guns, rifles that you purchased legally, but you let your PAL expire. So now you're a criminal, because now they're not legal anymore because you don't have a PAL.
I'll give you a concrete example of that for the audience with the Coots, the gentleman in remand in Coots.
Yeah.
One of the charges against them, I don't remember the details, but they were in possession of an illegal firearm. That doesn't mean that they had a Stinger missile. They had a gun that instead of, 11 clip maximum, it had 12 bullets in it. So something like that becomes a criminal offense.
Yeah.
Uh,
And they change it on you. So when you purchased it, it was legal. And then they made a change. So now you have to put in like a block or something in the chain. Well, whatever. I'm not technical, but you have to put something in your rifle now so that you can't put in X amount of ammunition. And so if you didn't put that block in, or if that block fell out, or if they took it out, then
it was
that
the wrong
firearm was
color
illegal.
block. It was wrong specifications of the block. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that's how they get you, and
Yeah.
it's very difficult to stay up to date with this stuff, and you think that it's not going to impact you, and then look what happened to these four boys.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. And then
Uh,
they say ignorance is no excuse, right? They changed the law on you, but you had no idea. Yeah.
that argument that ignorance is no excuse, that only applies when people are capable of understanding the law. When the law is there's so much law out there, and it's incomprehensible to the average person, I don't think that applies anymore.
Yeah, but I think it's really hard to get off on that defense, right?
Oh yeah, I know. This is between you and me. Don't use this at trial.
Yeah.
Isabel, last question. Actually, last request. You wanted to talk about Bill C-293.
Yeah, yeah. So I was shocked when I found out that Bill C-293 had already passed third reading and had passed first reading in the Senate. And I was like, well, like, was I asleep through something? Like, I didn't hear anything about this. Like, I didn't hear any of the alarms. So I read the bill, and it sounded very much like WHO speak. So I was trying to figure out who wrote this bill. So I don't know who. I mean, supposedly it was Mr. Nathaniel Erskine Smith who wrote the bill, who's a liberal from Beaches, um, East York, and he claims that he authored the bill. Um, but he also admits that he looked at the WHO and the WEF, and he was using guidance from documents about climate change and uh, well, One Health. It's actually, he said when he presented to the Standing Committee of Health that he was almost calling the bill One Health. Um, and when you read the bill, and section 3 of the bill basically says that our pandemic preparedness plan must, so they use the word must, align with One Health, which is WHO's One Health, which is UN's One Health. And I mean, that could change. We don't know what it's going to say, like, tomorrow or in a year's time, but this legislation is binding us as a nation to align our plan with whatever the One Health doctrine is. So a few months ago, everybody was up in arms about the IHR, like the International Health Agreements, and the Pandemic Accord. You know, country states were, or the citizens were telling their states not to adopt that, not to sign on to it. Well, with this act, with Bill C-293, it doesn't matter if we're, signed into that treaty, or, committed to the international health regulations or anything, because our like own law says that we have to comply. So that's very dangerous. So I had a few questions. So one was, who was the author? And it's like, I mean, Mr. Erskine Smith says that he's the author. He presented it as if it was something that he had written. And so I thought, okay, well, what was the opposition? Like, how did the Conservatives vote on this bill? Okay. So the Conservatives voted against it. So that's great. They have a problem with it. They voted against it. Obviously, every Liberal voted for it. Every NDP voted for it. The Green Party voted for it. The Bloc, I have to say, I can't remember if every single Bloc MP voted for it. There might have been a few that voted against it. But anyway, so it passed. So I'm thinking, okay, well, how did the official opposition, so how did the Conservatives um, not defend, but what were the arguments that they made to try and convince either Liberal MPs or MPs from other parties to not support the bill, or at least abstain if they couldn't, if they're being whipped, they may have to, vote along party lines. But if they abstain, maybe there's a chance that this bill wouldn't have passed, right? So I looked at the first reading to see what were the comments made during the reading, and what were the response to those comments. So, do you know how many MPs from the Conservative Party were present during the first reading? Payman, do you
Zero?
want to take a guess?
Negative zero? Less than zero? What
It
was
was
it?
one
Oh,
Conservative member of Parliament from Manitoba. And this gentleman spoke the truth. And he made some very good points that I'm trying to find my notes here to tell you what those points were. Um, he basically said that it was government overreach, that there were jurisdictional challenges. So they were going from, overstepping their bounds into provincial legislation, provincial territory, things of that nature. And he also asked the question about what happened to our pandemic preparedness plan that was suspended, dismantled in 2019. I believe it was June of 2019. So he wanted to know who made that decision. Why were we left unprotected? Like, what happened to our own plan that it was purposefully, set aside? So his questions were not answered, and his concerns were not answered or not addressed either. And some of the other MPs were basically saying, like, we didn't lock them down hard enough, like we, we should have. So it was actually pretty scary to read all of the comments that were being made about that bill. But the point that I wanted to make is that for something as serious as this, the Conservatives weren't there. So why weren't they there? Was it because they felt that it wasn't worthy of their time? Did they feel that just voting no for it is enough? Which I don't agree. I think that they need to be our voice. So the MP that did speak said that he heard from his constituents, and basically, we are not okay with handing over our sovereignty to an external entity. Third reading. Do you know how many people spoke out from the Conservatives on the time that it was read a year and a half later on June the 3rd of 2024?
three, I'm guessing.
Now, there was one that spoke up. I don't know how many were in the House, but only one that spoke up, and it was an MP from Manitoba. And he basically reminded the members of Parliament that their job is to represent the people, and the people need to be listened to. Their concerns need to be listened to. Their concerns have to be respected. So he had a very good, he was making a very good case, but again, he was alone. During the third reading, a member of Parliament from the Bloc Québécois said something that I thought was very interesting. So the Conservatives have been asking for an independent inquiry, so have the NDP, on the whole COVID response. Okay. We should have an independent inquiry. Um, the that MP said that there was a motion to amend the act to have a requirement that there has to be an independent review. And she said that the government members, so the Liberals and some Conservatives, voted against it, which I was really surprised about. So she said that that shows a level of a lack of transparency from the part of the government and a certain level of hypocrisy from the Conservative Party. So I thought that was interesting. I did not know that. So yeah, like I'm just wondering where the representation is from the other Conservatives that are supposed to be holding the government to account. That kind of made me think about something that I had read earlier in the year with regards to the National Citizens Inquiry, that some of the members of the National Citizens Inquiry happened to be Conservatives, and they were also trying to shut down the inquiry. So the speculation from the author of the memo that I read is of the position that the reason they want to shut down the inquiry and don't want to continue with any more hearings is that they're anticipating a Conservative government, and so they don't want a continued scrutiny of, the government. So that was interesting too. It was like, okay, so
I was actually thinking
that's that.
about that when you mentioned the Bloc Québécois MP. I thought the National Citizens Inquiry and how they didn't want to expose or embarrass the Conservative Party.
Yeah. Yeah. So, for people that are, thinking, okay, well, the Conservatives are going to save us, I think that they need to take a deep dive. Something like Bill C-293 that is so important. When you look at what we've went through in COVID without the bill, things were pretty horrific. This bill basically would allow forced injections and seizure of private property. So it's a really important piece of legislation. There is a call to action. So for you and your audience, if you would like to get more information, there's a lawyer from Nova Scotia who's done wonderful work in this regard. She has a Substack. It's Lawyer Lisa. And she has many posts, but the post that I remember is from October 2nd. And in that post, there's links that you could click on and email every member of the Senate to say that you are opposed to Bill C-293, and it provides reasons why. And there's also another link to another organization that I'm just trying to see here. I think I'm trying to remember if it's Connect Law, or anyway, there's a few different
I love
links
that website.
and Lisa, in that website, and that would send an email to every member of the Senate. And then there's also some sample templates for letters if you wanted to write a letter. And timely enough, I don't know if you or your readers, this is all blurry too.
Is that Druthers?
Druthers, this month's edition of Druthers. Okay, if you look on page 3, I believe it is, there is page 4. The bottom part of page 4 is the implications of Bill C-293. The other thing that I'm very passionate about is our natural health products. And interesting enough, there is also an article written by Sean Buckley on page 10 of this month's Druthers paper about the attack that they have on our natural health products. So basically, they're coming at us from, every angle.
Yeah, the Sean Buckley is part of a lobbyist group, the Natural Health Product Protection Agency, NHPPA.
Yes.
So if anybody wants to get involved, they can donate to his cause.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's done amazing work both on the National Citizens Inquiry and on the Natural Health Protection Act or Association. So the natural health products has been under attack for decades. So it's like the Conservatives, they had many opportunities to actually address this issue as well. So I'm not holding my breath that they're going to fix that. So yeah, we just need to make sure that we explain or at least bring these things to the public's attention and have them make up their own decision. Like, I don't like telling people what to think. I just want to give people access to the information and ask them to make up their own mind. And I repeat what Maxime Bernier always says is vote with your conscience, and you then have to live with those results, right? So for many, many years, I used to play the game too, vote for the lesser of the two evils. We can't do that anymore. It's not like the circus, like the pitchfork people and the torch people and, getting one against the other. We have to get out of that, and we have to vote with our principles in mind and vote with our conscience.
It's a beautiful message, Isabel. We're at the end of the episode. Can you maybe tell the audience where they can follow you, learn more about you, support you?
Okay, so the best place right now is actually at the People's Party of Canada website, on the candidates page. There is a link, and so you could send messages through that link. I have a Substack, so it's Isabel Pereira at substack.ca, I believe it is, but I will send you that link. So those would be the two, I guess, best ways of reaching me right now. And through the website, you'd have access to email me.
Sounds good, Isabel. I'm gonna hold you over until after the episode, but I want to thank you for coming on. I wanted to thank you for educating me on Bill C-293 and I don't know, telling us more about yourself.
Well, thank you. It was a pleasure.
All right, have a nice day.
Okay, you too.